Well, actually, we used to do it differently, didn't we, on days like today? We used to let the Mayor of London do the introduction and identify as a radio presenter for a few minutes.
Yeah, that was when I was demoted to radio presenter, but I realised that actually I just keep my elevated position as the Mayor of London and let you be the humble radio presenter. But good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here for this month's version of Speak To Sadiq, and looking forward to speaking to and listening to as many callers as I can.
Which we will start rattling through imminently. But first, a quick word on the 7th anniversary of Brexit, marked in slightly strange fashion on the BBC last night. Are you having a drinks reception at City Hall or setting off party poppers on the terrace?
Well, the key thing I want to get across today to those Londoners who are originally from the EU is to say thank you. Thank you for staying over the last 7 years. Many of these people are our friends, neighbours, colleagues and loved ones, and they've had a rotten 7 years, been used as bargaining chips when it came to negotiating with the EU. Real question marks about what settled status means. They've had to be in the receiving end of anti-migrant rhetoric from our government, and they've stayed. More than 1.1 million EU Londoners, and I'm really grateful for the contribution they make to food, fashion, financial centre, public services, making our city and our country, in my view, stronger, healthier and more successful.
There's quite a lot of fake news around, not all of it involving cats and benefits. Are you really facing trouble for having a flag? Are they really? Has it really been suggested that City Hall could be prosecuted for displaying the EU flag on the anniversary of the Brexit referendum?
I mean, an example of how crazy things have got is often we fly a flag outside City Hall to show solidarity and support. For example, we'll be flying the Pride flag during the course of this month because it is Pride month. When there are tragedies across the globe, we fly flags of countries where people have been affected. And we thought it'd be a great idea today, on the 7th anniversary, to fly the European Union flag. And lo and behold, we discovered that the law was changed last year, the year before last, which specifically prohibits the flying of the EU flag on a public building unless you go through a laborious, lengthy, burdensome, expensive process to get specific permission from the government. So you can fly the UN flag, you can fly the Commonwealth flag, you can fly the flag for most countries. We're flying the Ukrainian flag.
We're in the UN and the Commonwealth, aren't we? So it's not necessarily quite as anomalous as you're trying to portray.
Well, when there were tragedies in New Zealand, we flew the flag of New Zealand.
Of course, but there aren't tragedies in the EU.
Well, no, but
Brexit might be a tragedy, but it's not quite eggs and eggs.
There are 1.1 million Londoners who are from the EU who, feel they're the other, who, today's an important day for them, and just showing the flag is an act of solidarity with those
But
Londoners.
if you flew it, do you really think that your collective colours would have been felt?
I think the issue is this: I believe in the rule of law. Look, listen, and it's particularly relevant this of all weeks in relation to our former Prime Minister being shown to have broken the law and lied to Parliament. I may not agree with the law. I may not have been responsible for passing it, but it's really important that we follow the law. And what I don't want to do is a symbolic act is on the plus side, but actually breaking the law on the negative side. I'm in favour of not breaking the law.
Shall we start with the calls?
The first caller is from Barnes in South London, and it's James. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
My question for you is, it's about Hammersmith Bridge.
Yeah.
Hammersmith Bridge has now been shut for 4 years, and you're still unable to even cycle over it. The council, TfL and national government all seem more interested in blaming each other for the delays rather than actually solving the problem. And I think as a local resident, quite frankly, I'm a bit sick of it. So I'd like to know from you personally, what are you going to do?
So would I, James. Absolutely. Well, I mean, first of all, don't start passing the buck before we've even drawn breath on this. There must have been more you as Mayor of London could do. It's absolutely bonkers where James is. People have to make 2, 3, 4 mile round trips just to get to the other side of a bridge.
Well, James, so I also share your frustration with the lack of action, but the bridge is owned by the council. The council simply can't afford to do the works required to make the bridge fit for purpose for not just cycles that you mentioned, but also vehicles, including buses. So the council hasn't got the money. We haven't got the money. During the pandemic, our fares box dried up, but also we've got support from the government in relation to a grant, which we're grateful for. The only person that's got the money, the only organisation that's got the money to fix the bridge is the government. And so, the council ourselves are lobbying the government to provide the capital support to repair the bridge. Roughly speaking, it's about £150 million, which the council can't afford, nor can we. And, this is a bridge that is listed, and so the repairs aren't straightforward. And so what we're saying to the government is it's in nobody's interest for further delay, because people like you and many others are being inconvenienced. But we've got to, the council's been honest. We've been honest from day one. We need the government to step in and support the community.
Could you find a few quid? The council could find a few quid, and the government could find a few quid.
So at the moment, what James...
It's a Labour council, isn't it, in Hammersmith and Fulham?
Yeah, but the bridge has had problems for decades. But so the issue...
No, I'm just wondering if you think if it were a Conservative council, central government might have been a little bit more active on this.
No, so James will know this, I'm sure. But so Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary at the time, went down to the bridge and said, if you vote for our Tory candidate for mayor, we will fix the bridge.
Oh, gosh.
He didn't win. He's now in the House of Lords.
Okay. Which one was that? The one who ran the racist campaign, or the one who ran the failed campaign?
It's the lawbreaker.
Okay.
But so and they're playing party politics, and James doesn't care about that. What James wants is the bridge to be sorted out. And so what the council is saying is, look, there is a way through this, but we need support from the government, and we work with the council, work with the government in the meantime to get the bridge open for pedestrians and cyclists. But James is frustrated, as many others are.
James, what's the word on the ground? I mean, because it's a curious issue that I'm quite close to myself. What do active members of the community see as the major sticking point here? Who do you blame, I suppose I'm asking?
It's a good question. I do think we need more national government support in terms of the funding. I completely get those points. I think the frustration here is that it is really being treated as a political football. It seems that everybody is more interested in blaming other parties, and it would be just good. And I get how expensive it is, how old it is, but I mean,
it's crazy. It's a huge bridge crossing one of the biggest rivers, one of the most famous rivers in the whole world, and you can walk across it. I think you can cycle across it, but you can't drive across it. I just briefly, Sadiq Khan, is there light at the end of the tunnel is an odd figure of speech to use in this context.
No, because
is there any?
Unless the government steps in, James, I can't see where. Let me tell you why. Because most of the people who use the bridge live on the southern side of the bridge. Hammersmith and Fulham on the northern side of the bridge own the bridge. So one of the options being considered is, for example, a toll to pay for the cost of repairing the bridge, which wouldn't be felt as much by residents of Hammersmith and Fulham. For obvious reasons, they use the bridge less. It would be felt by residents on the other side of the bridge. And that's why, for many people on the southern side, that is a non-runner. And I've got, listen, the only show in town is the government, and the government's got to step in. This is a crucial piece of infrastructure in that part of London, in West London, and it discourages people to use public transport and so forth. So, I am concerned about this delay is helping nobody.
I am, James, thank you. I'm sorry that there isn't better news. I am conscious of the closure of a bridge in Hammersmith not necessarily being at the top of the political agenda elsewhere in the country. I can't imagine it's particularly big news in Glasgow this morning, but just imagine, if you are in Glasgow or anywhere else, just imagine a local bridge, and then imagine that it's shut. And then remember that we are supposedly a first world country, or one of the 6 or 7 largest economies in the world, and people like James, and to a much lesser extent myself, have been essentially watching a useless bridge for the best part of 4 years. It's very strange indeed. On we go.
The next caller is from Ladbroke Grove, and it's Vicky. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning. Yes, I have a very small studio flat, which I've been renting out for 6 years. I've not put the rent up in all that time because having a fixed rate mortgage, I didn't really need to. But the fixed rate ends. So I have two choices. I can double the rent and I still won't quite break even. I'll be close, but not close enough. Or I will sell the flat. Either way, my tenant will be rendered homeless because I presume she wouldn't be able to afford a doubling of the rent. And I wanted to know what the Mayor could do, or is going to do, for people like me to avoid making thousands of tenants homeless.
Well, thanks for calling in, Vicky. At the core of your challenge is obviously the interest rates going through the roof. And so what I've done is written to the Chancellor and Michael Gove, who's responsible for levelling up and local government. I wrote to them this week, suggesting things they could do in their meeting today with mortgage lenders, which may assist you in relation to the fixed term rate coming to an end. a number of things they could do. They could, for a period of time, give people the option of just doing interest only rather than repayment both. Another thing they could do is give people a mortgage holiday without them being penalised by the credit rating agencies. They could have a moratorium in relation to repossessions of those who are struggling to pay it. And so I've set out a number of things the government could do because, I mean, Vicky, you gave the consequences of your example. We discovered this week that if somebody has got a mortgage of £350,000 and they go from a fixed rate of 2.5% to the current rate of 6%, they'll be paying £700 extra a month. And so that's why your case isn't isolated. And so unless the government steps in, working with the mortgage companies and the FCA, I'm afraid your case isn't isolated. Not a lot I can do as the mayor or even the Labour Party in Parliament as the opposition, but there are things the government can do working with the mortgage companies and the FCA.
Vicky, what happens to you? Have you spoken to your tenant yet?
We're dreading it. We're doing it today.
And you're telling them it's going up, it's doubling overnight, essentially.
We're not. At the moment, we're saying we're going to just have to sell it, which is even worse for her because all the rents have gone up so much. Yeah. So our rent is really cheap for her. Yeah. She's going to have to pay double whether she stays with us or goes somewhere else.
Yeah, where her stories...
It's only a studio flat, so I presume she's not rich, and doubling the rent will just not be possible for her.
And you're thinking of selling it because you would struggle to find someone to come in at the new rate of rent, which you'd need to receive to cover your own mortgage.
Correct.
And landlords historically don't necessarily have many listeners or most listeners reaching for their violins, but this is, I mean, it's a stupid response to be crass about that because it's a crucial part of the property market in London.
A lot of landlords use the property as their pension, right?
Yes, but also Vicky hasn't put it up for 6 years.
Yeah, no, exactly. There are lots of responsible landlords, and we are now hearing stories about private tenants entering auction in relation to a new property for them to, be a tenant in and stuff. I mean, the supply of affordable housing has not met the demand, which is leading to inflation in the housing market. But the problems we're seeing at the moment, are a consequence, and I'm sorry for a moment to get party political, is the inverted commas mini budget last year and the consequences of mismanagement over a period of time.
Amazing how Sadiq has all of the answers to the government's problems, but none of his own, says this texter. And there was another one here. Please pull up the mayor on the wasted money on the road changes and ULEZ cameras and all these other things that they have wasted money on. I think that might pop up in the next question, actually.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, I'm not going to be embarrassed or apologise for talking about the Tory mortgage bombshell, which is what Vicky's suffering. The next call is from Edgware, and it's Sammy. Good morning, Sammy.
Good morning. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I did leave a message a while ago for Mr. Khan about purchasing cars. We feel that we're people who save up for things. We don't have these kind of money saved up to go and purchase these cars. Suddenly you send us a letter out to say, okay, go and buy the cars. We don't have that kind of money. I work for NHS. I do have to travel a lot. I have a lot of people I know, staff, service users, etc. They're all saying they won't be able to go and buy cars out straight away. So they'll end up paying £12.50. Now, I know I came on and my husband had a heart attack as well earlier on, so it's difficult. My fridge went. I had to buy a small one because obviously we couldn't spend a lot of money. Our bills have gone up drastically. We've gone through like virus stage. We've got this war. The food's expensive. Bills are high, and it's just.
And you're worried that you're going to have. You're worried you're going to have to pay the ULEZ charge in order to get to work and back.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people. Like youngsters, pensioners, older.
Well, let's focus
people.
on you, Sammy. Because your situation sounds really difficult, and the mayor's policy is going to make it possibly untenable.
Sammy, I'm very sorry to hear about your circumstances. Can I just check? So you've got a vehicle, and you've checked it, and it's not compliant. It's more than 18 years old, is it?
Yes, it is. It is a good vehicle, but obviously I would have to pay money.
Okay, and you've not received any assistance from Transport for London in relation to supporting you?
No, I've completed the form, but I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
So, I mean, my point wasn't that it's just trying to get funds off anyone. Throughout our lives, we've done things ourselves. If this period was extended, if there was some information also given in advance, there was no leaflets or it wasn't planned, like 5 years or 4 years. It's suddenly, okay, you go and buy cars. That is not right for everyone. I think it should be planned. It should be in stages. It should be like with car companies. It should be done properly. I don't think that's been done.
Okay,
sure.
What do you say to that?
Let me deal with Sami for two things. Firstly, I'm very happy after this is finished to speak to you about how we can assist you personally, but let me do the wider issue about it should be done in stages. So in 2017 was a first stage of this where we brought in what's called the toxicity charge in central London. In 2019 was a second stage where we brought in the ULEZ in central London, which was higher standards, Euro 6 rather than Euro 4. The further stage was 2021 where we extended it to inner London. So not central London, but inner London up to North Circular and South Circular. And the further stage is this August 29th when it goes to all of London. And the basic reason, Sam, we're doing it is because we know that we've got an air pollution crisis in London, which leads to, in London, around 4,000 premature deaths. Across the country, around 36,000 premature deaths. But in London, not only does it lead to premature deaths, but it leads to children getting stunted lungs forever, but adults with a whole host of health issues from cancer, dementia, heart issues, which I know is relevant to you and your husband, and other health consequences. And so just like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, we knew about the dangers of tobacco and politicians didn't take action, I don't want to be in that situation. So I know of the consequences of air pollution. We're taking action, but we're supporting people to take action. That's why I would like to speak to you after to see what help we can give you. And the good news, Sammy, is in outer London, more than 9 out of 10 cars that are now seen driving are compliant. And in inner London, it's more than 95%. So our policy is not just leading to fewer toxic fumes coming from cars, but the air is better. And I'll tell you an amazing stat. Because of our policies in central London, there's been a third fewer children admitted in hospital with asthma. That shows the difference our policies are making.
What happens if you lose this court case on July the 4th?
Well, let's wait and see what the court case is. I don't want to second guess, but I've said earlier on in relation to the flag issues, I respect the rule of law, right? And let's wait and see what the court case says. We're confident in relation to defending this challenge.
But the other side seem pretty confident too. But I take your point. We'll jump off that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to speak. Answer this though. Could you ask Mr. Khan the following? With the introduction of the ULEZ extension, what his measure of success will be? In a year's time, what will the scheme deliver in real terms to improvements to air quality? If the current measurement is 8 out of 10, what will the ULEZ scheme deliver? And if it doesn't work, if he doesn't deliver the improvements he predicts, how will he compensate Londoners?
Good question. So each stage of the ULEZ, what we've done is make sure there's a proper study about the benefits of ULEZ, which is why I can say with confidence, Central London ULEZ led to a reduction of nitrogen dioxide by 44%, particulate matter by 27%, carbon reductions by 6%, because it was assessed properly after a year. The second phase, which was the extension to inner London, a further reduction of 21%. So the expansion to all of London, there are predictions about what will happen, further reductions in nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, carbon emissions. That is assessed, and after a year, we'll have a good idea of the progress we've made in relation to quality of air, which is crucial, but also those who have decided to use public transport, walking or cycling. And I'm really pleased that in outer London, we're going to be introducing the Superloop bus, an orbital bus, to give people alternatives to driving their car where they can.
I mean, we've spoken about this a lot, possibly more than any other subject, and I've also probably articulated more criticism to you and of you on this than any other subject. I'm always keen to get clarity. This is a mission for you. It's different from other political issues, and that parallel with the tobacco is key, because if we went back in time and there was somebody convinced that tobacco needed to be outlawed or massively reduced or advertising it, I mean, even if you were the only one in the room calling for this, you'd still be calling for it. You just happen to be the mayor, which is possibly what some people find so frustrating.
So look, this wasn't an easy decision for me to make. It was a tough decision. Clearly it would have been attractive to kick the can down the road and to delay taking action. But it is personal to me because, whether I was a lawyer or a politician, I like to look at the evidence. And the evidence is quite clear. You listen to the chief medical officer, you look at the evidence from the inquest into the death of Ella Kissi-Deborah, you listen to the experts at Imperial College or at King's College, but also it is a fact that politicians, positions in power, knew about the dangers of climate change, didn't take action. They knew about passive smoking. You remember this remarkable man called Roy Castle, who used to be a great TV presenter but a great trumpet player. Roy Castle's case was remarkable to me because Roy Castle is somebody who never smoked a cigarette a day in his life. Because he played the trumpet in working men's clubs, he got lung cancer. And I, as an MP, James, in 2006, voted to ban smoking in public places. Nobody would now dream about reintroducing smoking in pubs, reintroducing it in gigs.
So you see it in the same, very much in the same
absolutely,
space, which I hope that helps some people understand, because I understand their frustration as well.
There are more deaths as a consequence of air pollution in the world than there are of lung cancer linked to tobacco.
23 minutes after 10 is the time. Here's one you'll like. Please ask Sadiq Khan why he is a coward and refuses to be interviewed by Nick Ferrari, but will speak with his sycophantic fan, James. That's from Ian. It's something Nick refers to quite regularly, which means I have to ask you the question once or twice a year.
Well, I speak to journalists, presenters all the time, but this show is the most popular show on LBC.
Didn't used to be, so you still made that choice before I became the most popular show on LBC.
I hope it's cause and effect. Had I been on the Ferrari show, that he's may still be the popular. But listen, I provide leadership, not followership.
Another call, I think, if we would.
The next caller is from Southwark, and it's Steph. Hey, Steph. Steph, are you there?
Let's try Rowan in Enfield. Rowan, have you got a question for the Mayor?
I do, yeah. So I just wanted to ask Sadiq if he thought, especially on the topic of air pollution, whether the cycle lanes in London, could have been implemented better. A lot of areas, especially where I live throughout North London, they're they're ridiculous, to be honest, especially considering the fact that they tend to just cut off, go into bus lanes. If we're talking about cyclist safety and things like this, it doesn't really help for sort of the outer areas when looking at London. And it causes more congestion alongside the lower traffic neighbourhoods. So again, in terms of tackling air pollution as a whole, the way in which cycle lanes throughout London have been delivered sort of go against that. So I just want to get
do you cycle, Rowan?
I don't, but I sympathise with cyclists.
Rowan, you make a fair point. Let me know why your point is fair. Because 95% of roads in our city are owned by different councils. We've got 32 councils and then the corporation in the centre. And the problem that creates, Rowan, is each council does its policies in relation to road usage different to each other, different to another borough. So you could be cycling in Borough A, like for example, say Southwark, and you've got great, safe, sensible cycle lanes. You then come to another borough where they've got different policies on cycle lanes, and literally when you cross a traffic light, the quality of cycle lanes changes, but also different boroughs have different policies in relation to what you call low traffic neighbourhoods, the LTNs. And that's why there's been some of the challenges that you're alluding to. And there's a third problem, which is historically we've thought about cycle lanes as going from outer London into the centre. Well, what about those who cycle within a borough or around the orbitals? What we've tried to do, Rowan, is in a collegiate way work with councils, a coalition of the willing, to have a sensible strategic role in relation to the use of road space. We can't force a council when they own the road to do a sensible road scheme or a sensible LTN. We can try and persuade them. Some councils do it really well. The Hackneys, the Islingtons, the Southwarks, some do it really badly. The Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, just one example. And so it is a frustration, Rowan. But, unless I take over these roads, from the councils, we've got to carry on trying to persuade the coalition of the Willins. And the final point is the issue of unintended consequences of low traffic neighbourhoods, what's called displacement leading to traffic on main roads and other issues around that. That has been a concern in some of the LTNs, and what good councils are doing is making sure they assess the success of an LTN, whether it's working, is leading to displacement, and if it is causing collateral problems, trying to address those. A good council will not make an LTN permanent unless they've properly consulted.
This is, again, it's another one of those frustrating cul-de-sacs, isn't it, where Rowan makes lots of valid points, you agree that they're valid, and then you say there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, well, unless the government decides to, and I wouldn't support this necessarily, say all the councils are abolished, give me all the roads. I've got to work with coalition with the councils.
Staying with air quality, I haven't checked the provenance of this claim, but I've seen it elsewhere, that the quality of air on the underground is up to 20 times worse than it is on the streets. What are you doing about that?
Yeah, I've seen that flying around as well. It's just that's not true.
It's probably worse down there than it is up here, isn't it?
No, there are issues in relation to dust, in relation to the cabins of drivers driving our tubes, actually. which is a source of concern to me. And so that's why we would take. It's not breaking any laws and it's not a breach of health and safety, but it could be cleaner. That's why we're taking steps to clean up the air on the underground, the dust particles. We're also working not just to make sure we clean up the air, but working with experts to see what more we can do. One of the challenges is the underground is more than 150 years old, so there's a lot of dust in the tunnels and stuff. But the underground I used this morning is safe to use in relation to dust and air quality. Subsurface, though, isn't safe, and we're breaching not just our own laws in relation to air quality, nitrogen dioxide, but also WHO guidelines.
So what are you doing about it?
The ULEZ, right? So before I became mayor...
It's ULEZ, is it? Not ULEZ? There's a raging debate.
Potatoes.
I'm changing the way I pronounce it. I'm going for ULEZ now.
Potatoes. So the issue is this, look, so the King's College said that the policies that were in place before I became mayor, it would take 193 years to bring our air within lawful limits. They say we can do it by 2025 because of our policies. ULEZ is one of them. Euro 6 bus is another one. More electric taxis is another one. More cycling is another one. These are some examples of the policies that means that by 2025, our air will be within legal limits. But for those policies, you have to wait another 190 years.
But back briefly to you, Les. If I was starting out now on my own, says Gary, who is a painter and decorator, more of an artisan than a craftsman. I've seen some of his work, and the guy's a decorating genius. But if he was starting out on his own now, he'd have to find the funds to buy a compliant van. And he doesn't think he'd be able to. He started with a $2,000 van to get up and running. Is there help now for anyone starting from scratch, for anyone looking to start up their own business with compliant vehicles?
So if you haven't got a vehicle at all, we can't give you any support to buy a vehicle from scratch. But what I would say is that to be compliant, if it's a petrol vehicle, it's got to be 18 years or newer, and if it's a diesel vehicle, 8 years old or newer. So it's not true to say you've got to buy a brand new electric car or van or minibus for it to be compliant. That is not the case.
Let's try Steph again in Southwark. Steph, has your line been restored?
Yes. Hi.
Hey, Steph. Good morning.
Hi,
Hello.
James. Thanks for taking my call. So I have a question about rental hikes and road landlords. I moved into my room in a 6-bedroom property in 2021, and at that point my rent was $780. Since then, in the last year, my landlord has hiked my rent 3 times and is asking for £1,200 for my room. In addition to that, he's also asking myself and my other roommates to pay an additional £400 each for energy bills, and this is not the first time he's done this, so we keep getting random costs pulled out of thin air, and I'm also a freelancer, so it's quite difficult for me to find alternative accommodation, and I just want to know what you can do to help people like me who are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, paying for somewhere we can't afford, but also not being able to move somewhere which is more within our budget, if there is even anything within our budget in the city, to be honest.
So Steph, I'm really sorry about your case, and the bad news is I, on a daily basis, meet Londoners who are in a similar position to you. We have 2.7 million Londoners who are renting from a private landlord. In Scotland, the Scottish government were persuaded, after lobbying from people like you, politicians, campaigners, to bring in rent freezes. And they first have a rent freeze for 6 months. The rents can go up by a penny for 6 months. For the second 6 months, they've said only a 3% increase can be allowed. We're lobbying the government to do the same. Michael Gove's published a bill which will remove what's called no-fault evictions, but he's not introduced into there any support for affordability for people like you, Steph, because for the foreseeable future, even with a Labour government, even if we build record numbers of affordable homes, the supply doesn't meet demand. And so, the issue of affordability is a big issue. And so, short of the government introducing those sorts of policies in London, I'm really sorry to say, Steph, for the foreseeable future, there is nothing that we can do to support you except to try and lobby the government for those changes. The point I make to the government is the skies haven't fallen in Scotland since they introduced this policy 8-9 months ago, and the lobbying they've had from landlords saying, listen, if you have rent freezes, the sky's going to fall in. I don't accept the argument, and so we're going to carry on lobbying, Steph, because my worry is people like you will leave London because you can't afford to stay in London.
What are your options, Steph?
I'm not really sure at this moment. Pay this rent until I can no longer afford it, potentially move back in with parents.
Yeah.
As a freelancer, it's just difficult to find a flat anyway, because people want you to be in full-time employment.
Right.
Even if you have a regular income as a freelancer, it's unpredictable. So my options are very limited, to be honest with you. And I just feel like this landlord kind of preys on the fact that myself and others don't really have many other options.
It's a landlord lottery, isn't it? Because Eddie's been in touch as well to say he's just spoken to one who's gleefully told me he's put up his tenant's rate by £300, but it's tied into a fixed rate for another 3 years. So some people are milking it, and then the first caller was the opposite. It's a complete lottery.
Yeah. And the problem is, it is just it's a free for all. One of the things that we've said to the government is there should be a landlord licensing system as well. And so the thing is, Steph, there are really good, pragmatic, sensible ideas to fix this. This is not one of those insurmountable problems, and it actually doesn't cost the government any money. And by the way, a lot of landlords actually have paid off their mortgage as well. So we mentioned those on a long fixed-term mortgage, those who've had challenges because they're coming up for fixed term, and all landlords haven't got a mortgage, they're mortgage free. So, better support from the government would make a big difference. And my point to the government is, to be fair to them, they did listen during the pandemic, not to support those who are freelancers, but they did support renters during that period, no repossessions and so forth. And I think they can provide support now. And I've written to the Chancellor and Michael Gove asking for support, because I do worry people like you will leave London. It's a talent drain for our city, and we need people like you in our city.
And you get more social division as well, because people who can either get help with their rent from their family or move back in with parents in the southeast within the M25 then get first dibs on the jobs and the
unless you've got bank of mum and dad, you're going to really struggle to live in London. But also, one of the joys of London is our social diversity in relation to, you could be living next door to somebody who's upper middle class, some on the other side who's lower working class. That's the joys of our city, always has been, unlike other global cities, and we're in danger of losing that.
Speaking of money, what does TfL do with the ULEZ money? You can't clean the air with it, and you don't build the cycle lane, so where is it going?
So it goes towards providing the alternatives.
That's a text, by the way.
It goes towards providing the alternatives to driving. So, for example, the new electric buses we've got more, we've now got we've got more than 900 zero-emission electric buses. The money from the ULEZ goes towards that, but the ULEZ money is going to dry up very soon because more and more vehicles are becoming compliant. So the first year we make not much money because the setup costs. Years 2 and 3 we make a better money. That goes into buses, and so the Superloop, 1 million kilometres worth of new buses in outer London, more and more electric zero-emission buses. But from year 3, that goes to zero because the predictions are that all the vehicles will be compliant, so we're not going to be making the money as we were in years 1 and 2.
And what is the timeline for changing the qualifying age of vehicles being exempt from the ULEZ charge? Because you say that 92% of vehicles are exempt now. In 2 years' time, if you're still in the role, will that change?
No, the idea is we keep Euro 6, which is the gold standard. Even if there are more cleaner cars, we don't want to move the goalposts again. What we're going to do is make sure that as more and more vehicles become compliant, we also at the same time provide alternatives to cars and vans for those that can use them. Not everyone can. But actually, the other advantage is if you've got to drive for a living, by having other cars off the road that don't need to be there, there's less congestion, which makes it better for you.
I've heard someone call it ULE. It's an acronym, not some fancy French flourish, says that alliteration fan on my text line. Should we take one more?
The next caller is, I think, from Romford, and it's David. Good morning, David.
Oh, hello there. It's not actually Romford, it's Thurrock, but it's pretty close.
Okay. Sorry, David.
While I'm sitting out here now, there's a constant stream of aeroplanes going above my house, going to the city airport, all the time, one every 3 minutes. What sort of amount of pollution is coming out of those planes?
So
compared with cars, all the cars.
Yeah, so aviation pollution is an issue, both in terms of air quality, but also noise. As you just talked about, every 3 minutes you can hear the sound.
Get that on the tube. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt. You deal with David.
And so that's one of the reasons why, David, I'm not in favour of expanding City Airport, not in favour of a new runway at Heathrow Airport, not just because of the air pollution, carbon emissions, but also the noise pollution as well. At the same time, we're saying to the aviation industry, you've got to use innovation to make sure you're emitting less carbon and less air pollution. So, for example, there are some airlines exploring the use of sustainable aviation fuel, and other advances in technology, because you're right, there is carbon emissions and air pollution from aviation. In London, the three biggest causes of air pollution, climate change are transport, offices and homes. We're taking action on transport from City Hall. That's what we've got powers to do. But also we're having an impact on new developments, but we're lobbying the government for powers in relation to retrofitting.
Again, for people like David, not a great deal you can do about aeroplanes in the sky above London City Airport, except
no. But the point I think David was trying to make is there are other causes of air pollution. Yes. Yeah, and so it's not not doing one because there's another. Actually, it's doing what you can, and we've got to make sure that we do whatever we can to address the issue of air pollution and climate change, and also reducing congestion.
A couple of slightly more flippant questions. Would you be worried if Boris Johnson became a London mayoral candidate?
The flippant answer is bring it on.
And Morning James, it's on a similar theme actually. May I ask if there is any news regarding the opening of the Garden Bridge? That's from Harvey.
Yeah, in Boris Johnson's mind, he's not just opened the Garden Bridge, but also the Thames Estuary Airport, and also the bridge from here to Northern Ireland as well.
Let's squeeze in one more.
It's Isla from Hackney. Good morning, Isla.
Yeah.
Good morning. There it is. Quickly, Isla, if you would.
I was wondering if, as young people like me, how you're preparing them to get into careers.
Anything to help young people getting into work?
Great question, Isla. So we're doing a number of things to help young people get into work. I'm now responsible for the adult education budget. That's those above the age of 19. So we're providing a number of courses, free courses, for young people who aren't working to have the skills for the jobs that we know are being created. What we've done now with adult education is work with employers, saying, listen, you've got a business locally. You work with the college to work with us to provide help draft the syllabus, the curriculum, which means people who do the course will get the job when they leave. And the good news is that that's leading to more and more people getting the jobs in London that are being created in the green sector, in the tech sector, in culture, in social care, and in the health service as well. And the other thing, Isla, if you're below the age of 18, this summer and we have for the last year, providing courses and things to do in education, employment, to give people training to get jobs going forward as well. And, if you've not got a mentor and you're below the age of 24, go to the City Hall website. We're also providing young people with mentors who often provide good career advice, good support and good assistance to help them into, jobs or training or something they've not thought about.
Isla, good luck. 20 minutes to 11 is the time. That's almost it. I just ask your quick response to the topic I'll probably be doing after you leave the studio. Why do you think the government failed to put up a cabinet minister for question time last night when they were examining the 7-year anniversary of Brexit?
Well, I think it's telling that not only is there no government minister on question time when the audience is full of people who voted for this form of Brexit, but there's no prominent Brexiteer who went on question time as well. They brought out a minister from the 80s. I think it's really important for us to recognise, listen, whether you voted for Remain or voted for Brexit, there's this vow of silence from the government not talking about Brexit. Brexit is not working. Look at any metrics, whether it's the size of our economy, whether it's productivity, whether it's the cost of food, whether it's the exports we do to the European Union and elsewhere around the world. Why aren't we talking about it? You could still be somebody who voted a certain way but recognise there's a problem and try and fix it. Here's the irony. The people who will make Brexit less painful are probably going to be Remainers because they understand there are problems, they're trying to fix it.
When might we expect a member of the shadow cabinet to say any of that?
Well, listen, my job is to be the Mayor of London and speak for our city, but I know that, I heard David Lammy recently talking about the importance of having a good deal with the European Union, convergence with the European Union as recently as the last few days. And the reality is this, the choice is divergence from the EU, Singapore on the Thames, or convergence with our closest neighbour, a market of £500 million once.
Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, always a pleasure, and we will be returning to similar territory, no doubt, next month. The time now is 10:42.
The voices of LBC at the weekend.
Tobias Ulwood, Conservative MP.
Sangeeta Maiska.
This is a story that we are all talking about because it is a major piece of political choreography. What will you be doing?
I'm actually taking the Defence Committee on an important visit to Portsmouth.
So you won't be there in the House of Commons?
If I'm back in time, then certainly I will endorse the report.